Hello, I'm John and welcome to my channel, Disquiet and Dragons. Today we're going to be completing the Feels Personal Booktube tag. First thing I'd like to do is to thank Justin at Read More Books for tagging me in this Booktube tag. It's a tag that he came up with himself. Highly recommend checking his channel out. He talks about fantasy, science fiction, horror, and he also talks about graphic novels. I'll put his details in the description. The first question is a book that reminds you of a job you've had. And strangely, this is a book, I haven't read it myself, but it reminds me of a time when I worked with my sister, and that book is 50 Shades of Grey. If my sister ever sees this, she is going to absolutely kill me for telling this story. But I went into her office one day to ask her a question. I could see she was reading at her desk. She had a Kindle, and my sister isn't a big reader, so that piqued my interest straight away. So I was like, "Oh, what are you reading?" And she looked up and she just went bright red. And everyone had heard of 50 Shades of Grey. And I thought, no way Emmy's reading that. I said, "Are you reading 50 Shades of Grey?" And she went even redder. I didn't think it was possible for a person to go that shade of red. Anyway, for some strange reason, I don't know why, but every time I saw her reading, I put on like this really bad Yorkshire accent. I'd be like, "Anastasia, go fetch my cucumbers." And she'd just go bright red straight away. "Anastasia, where's the bananas?" And I teased her relentlessly, I was just happy she was reading a book. But yeah, a book that reminds me of a job I've had, 50 Shades of Grey. The next question is a book that reminds you of good friends. And I haven't seen this book talked about on Booktube at all. And that's a book called Legends and Lattes. You might have heard of it. Anyway, the reason, it doesn't remind me of a friend in particular, but it reminds me more of good friendships. Like when you've got one of your best friends and you're just hanging out with them and you just feel so at ease and you feel like you belong and that everything is right in the world. That's how I imagine the friendships and how the friendship descriptions are in this book. And it just reminded me of my very close friends and how when you're with them, you just feel at ease and you feel relaxed and you just feel like you belong. So yeah, Legends and Lattes, it reminds me of good friends. The next question is a comfort read you come back to again and again. And I've got two books for this question. The first one was one of the first proper novels that I read when I was a child, and I must have read this book 25 times in the course of my lifetime, and that is The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. I can't really tell much more about this book than what other people have said. Everybody knows this story, but it just takes, whenever I read it, it just takes me to a different time in my life, and you just feel so at ease, and I've got so much nostalgia for this book. And it reminds me of being like a kid in my bedroom when I was about 6 or 7, just like sat on the floor reading this book. I read it again recently and it still holds up. It's still an amazing story. So that's one book, one of my comfort reads. The other comfort read, I've only read it recently, but it just gave me so much nostalgia, and that is the Masters of the Universe book. If you're a guy of a similar age to me, like in your 40s, chances are you watched the Masters of the Universe cartoon as a kid. I absolutely loved it. I had loads of the toys, and this book, again, it just takes me back to a simpler time, a time when I was a kid, and there's just so much nostalgia involved with it. I remember when I was a kid and the cartoon would be on, and I'd just get home from school and I'd run upstairs, get all my figures, stand them on the floor in front of me, sit, watch it, run back upstairs with all the figures, and then like reenact the episode. And the feeling I had then, this book does a good job of giving me that feeling again. It's like when I look through and see the pictures of the toys I had at one time, it's just so comforting. As a book as well, it's really informative. The illustrations and photographs are brilliant. If you've got any, if you enjoyed Masters of the Universe, highly recommend getting this book. It's a really good read. The next question is a book with themes you're passionate about. And again, I've got 2 books for this question. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Krampus, the Yule Lord by Brom. The main story is there's a gentleman, he's a bit down and out on his luck. And one day near to Christmas, Santa Claus's sack smashes through the roof of his mobile home, and he basically takes this sack and he finds that he can pull all sorts of gifts out of it, and Krampus wants the sack and kind of hunts him down and finds him, and Santa Claus obviously wants his sack back, and he's kind of like in the middle of these 2 opposing factions. That's kind of where one of the themes that I'm passionate about comes into the story, because on the one hand you've got Santa Claus, and he's very much he thinks of everything as disposable. Like he uses, I don't want to go too far into the story because I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but he uses things, and once they've been used, he has no trouble in discarding them. Whereas Krampus, if something is used and gets broken or injured, it upsets him and he wants to use it again or to try and fix it. And I thought it was very much talking about a clash of the old ways and the new ways. On the one hand, it's kind of like consumerism versus the old ways of like fixing things and learning things and superstition and folklore. And I just feel that as wonderful as technology is, I just think that sometimes our way of life is just so fast, and it's nice to just think back and remember the old ways and superstitions and ways of doing things. And I just hope that those things are never lost, and that along the way we learn to look back in time at how to do things, and that having a screen in front of you isn't always the best way of doing things. And the next book with themes that I'm passionate about, and it goes back to the old ways again, is Magical Britain. This book, it's an absolutely beautiful book. It's an atlas, and it shows all the different magical places and power places within the British Isles. I'll read the back of the book for you. This unique atlas of magical Britain reveals an enchanted and often forgotten mythical past, charted through the hidden places in its sacred landscape. Explore Britain's mysterious otherworld of spirits, fairies, giants and dragons, and reconnect with folklore, myth and paganism in 650 sites. The reason I'm passionate about this book is I think it's important to remember the magical and wonderful places that we have in this country. I'd love to, I can't really go too far from home at the moment, for my car's not that reliable, but over time I'd love to visit lots and lots of places in this book. But being a pagan myself, I just find these places are so calming and relaxing when you visit them, and that's the reason why I'm passionate about this book. It just shows wonderful places around the country that I live in. And the final question is a book that hits close to home, And for this question, I'm choosing A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. I've spoken about this book before. It's an amazing book. It's about a monk called Sibling Dex who he's not quite happy with his life. So he becomes a tea monk, and he travels around the country, going to each village and town, and he sets up his wagon, and he listens to people's problems and makes them a cup of tea while they talk about it in the hopes of making them feel better. But even though he's had this kind of change of vocation, he still doesn't feel entirely satisfied. He feels that there's something more. And that's kind of what hit home with me with this story, this book. Because like many people, you probably get to a stage in your life and you're like, what am I doing with my life? And when I read this book, I was kind of in that kind of place. Wasn't entirely happy with my life. I'd suffered with my mental health, depression and anxiety a bit. And I just wasn't really sure what I was doing. But there was one paragraph towards the end of this book, and it completely changed my outlook on life. It's a part where Mosscap is talking to Sibling Dex, and in a roundabout kind of way, he just said, it's okay to just be who you are and just be. And that really hit home with me, and I thought, it's okay to just do things for the enjoyment of doing things. It changed the way that I spend my time. I started going and spending more time in nature, which I found really relaxing, and just walking around these wonderful places. I visit a lot of National Trust places. I just find them so calming and relaxing. And I know it's cliche to say that a book has changed your life, but that book really did. And my life is in such a better place since I made those little changes just because of, one paragraph in a book. And yeah, that's a book that hit close to home, and I'm so glad it did, because it changed my life for the better. Well, the next thing to do would be to tag some other booktubers, and I'd like to tag Peter at Peter Loves Books, and I'd like to tag my friend Ellie at Bibbidi Bobbidi Books. If you don't really fancy doing the tag, don't worry about it, but I just thought it'd be nice to tag someone anyway. Well, that brings us to the end of this video, and again, I'd really like to thank everybody who's liked, watched and subscribed to any of my videos. It really does mean a lot to me. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're all enjoying what you're reading. I'll speak to you again soon. Cheers. Bye.